Hi, babes. I'm going to read to you from my book, Swing. It's the 3rd anniversary of its publication on May 25th. And when I moved into this house last year, I forgot about this book. I forgot about its 2nd birthday. I didn't even have any copies of this book around my house. It has been stuck back in a closet. And I would just like to thank this sweet book for being so patient. And I would like to thank all of you for buying so many copies of this book, even when I don't talk about it. I just checked my audiobook sales, and there have been 5,000 copies of the audiobook sold. And I don't even talk about the book very much, and the audiobook came out a year after the paperback came out. So it is the 3-year anniversary of this book being published on May 25th. If you haven't read it yet, I would love for you to read it. I also narrate the audiobook, but I'm going to read for you. Hi, loves. I'm going to read for you a little bit of the book each night here for the next 7 nights, and I'm going to try to avoid spoilers. So this part that I'm going to read for you tonight is actually about skating, and there are some sexy scenes in here, and I can't read the spicy scenes, but I do read them in the audiobook, okay? If you started listening to the audiobook tonight, you would get to the award-winning chapter 4 spicy scene by tonight. But my favorite spicy scene is later in the book. Okay, but we are going to read chapter 7 tonight, and this is at the rink. For those of you who don't know, I was a figure skating coach and choreographer for 23 years. I started skating when I was 2.5 years old in Canada. From the time I was about 6 years old, I was on the ice 6 days a week until I was 39 years old because I coached and I started skating organizations in Canada and the US. I used to say I could start a synchronized skating organization in a hole in the wall, which I can. Chapter 27, 5, 6, 7, 8. The rink was silent, save for my cue and the 20 sets of blades making a crisp T-push on the ice, in unison. They executed their counter turns, then stopped. They each squatted down close to the ice to wipe away the snow on their tracing with the cuff of their warm-up jacket. I unzipped the bottom half of the zipper of my long parka so I could crouch with them. We were looking for flats. I was pushing them harder that season than ever before. After a few years of placing skaters at the appropriate team levels, I had fallen back into my habit of seeing potential over performance. I was starting to think that I would never shake it. Whenever I looked at a skater, especially one of my sweet skaters, with their quirks and their wittiness and their heart, their potential shone bright, blinding me to their actual capability. So there I was, kneeling on the ice at 6:30 a.m., trying to make up the difference. After so many years of the stress of coaching, feeling easier, it was feeling harder again. Every season, the competitiveness ramped up. There was a bigger push to have synchronized skating included in the Winter Olympic Games. Parents were willing to pick up their kid and drive farther each day toward a more competitive organization. The reason I moved to this country, the reason there had been job opportunities for me to begin with, was because Americans were willing to spend so much more time and money on their children's athletics than Canadians. It was starting to work against me, and my nerves were fried. At a recent team meeting, a parent had been drilling me about my alternate policy. I stated it over and over. It had been the same for years. They just kept pushing, insisting that there had to be some other motive, some other reason for me to sit kids. As they ceased to relent, I became increasingly more upset. The children in the room were all 11 and 12 years old, and I could see the stress building in their little faces, and I couldn't contain myself. For the first time in a parent meeting, I burst into tears. A few nights later, I lay in my bed under the new moon. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought that I should be getting my period the next day. I hoped that I would get my period the next day. I really hoped I did. Manny and I had concluded a long time before that we were done having babies. Then, as I relaxed further, a thought occurred to me. If I was pregnant, I could quit my job, and no one would be mad at me. Yes, no one would be mad. My body relaxed as my mind started to wander. If I get my period tomorrow, maybe I should try to get pregnant next month so I can quit my job, so no one will be mad at me. I sat straight up in bed, scaring myself out of sleep. What the fuck had I just been planning? What the actual fuck? That had been the scariest 10 seconds of my life. The thing was, we did not want a fourth baby, but we could have handled a fourth baby. Manny was a legit baby whisperer, and our boys were at a great age to start babysitting. Even though I was nearing 40, I would likely still approach labor like BMX riders approach the X Games. Bring it. The terrifying part was how I'd heard clearly that I really wanted to make a change and was manufacturing a grand excuse, in this case, growing a new freaking human, to give myself permission to make that change. I was ignoring the lesson I had learned the most painfully and repeatedly over my career as a coach. My gut always told me the right thing to do. And sometimes people hated it. And sometimes people acted like they hated me. But when I ignored it, the situation intensified until I eventually did what I had known was right all along. This was the teaching I had communicated to my athletes more than any other. As I counseled them during upsets with friends, conflicts with their parents, and when choosing colleges, they all knew that I fiercely believed that they would always know what was right for them. If they got quiet and listened, they would always know what to do. Everyone around them would have an opinion, but they would have the answer. And they needed to find the courage to act on their wisdom, even in the face of disappointing people who cared about them. Even though in 100 different ways, having another baby would have actually been easier than finding the courage to tell my skaters that I was moving on, I couldn't do it. I had to quit. And I had to show them how to walk through it. How to do the thing that no one wants you to do. And to do it with grace and honesty. I wanted to show them how to love something so much and still walk away. I wanted to show them that the only person they could ever really abandon was themselves. And I wanted them to truly believe that I never, ever wanted them to do that. What followed was the longest transition I had ever choreographed. During a synchronized skating program, the team changes shape as they flow across the ice. Each change of configuration from one shape to another is called a transition. Transitions were fun to choreograph, but notoriously challenging for skaters to perform. They knew they were going from one point-getting element to another, and often they just let their brains and their performances rest. Ladies, I pleaded, you need to keep your expression through the transition. I paused the video and zoomed in to show the blank eyes and hanging mouths. A giggle pulsed through the team. See this? I begged. All of you have it. It's like you think we've choreographed a resting transition face. I didn't choreograph that face. I threw my hands in the air. Seriously, you all have a bad case of RTF. I looked at them with wide, serious eyes. They tried hard to contain themselves, but their shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. I kept my face flat. You know what your expression is supposed to be. Don't zone out. The giggles were building inside me too, but I kept my expression extra serious as I looked to them for confirmation that they understood. They nodded, eyes clear but mouths twisted, trying not to laugh. Do it again, and no freaking RTF, I said, as I waved them towards their starting position. They turned away, and I rested my head on the boards, chuckles erupting from my belly as they made their way to their spots. So, in the months that followed, I often reminded them that we were all, in life and in our sport, in a period of transition. And we could let ourselves zone out, Or we could accept it for what it was. Life was really more transition than anything else. We always thought we would feel different when we arrived at the new place, a new accomplishment. But more often than not, it was an imaginary finish line. Wherever you go, there you are. We had talked a lot about how we all have our own imaginary finish lines. I used to think I would feel accomplished when I had 2 teams in my organization, then 3, then 10, or when I got a team to nationals, or when I got 3 teams to nationals, or when we were on the podium more often than when we were not. For the skaters, it was when they got to that next team level, when they passed the test, when that boy or girl liked them. All imaginary finish lines. If we couldn't love ourselves before we reached them, we wouldn't love ourselves when we did. We had to stay in the moment, even when we were certain we were in between the important parts. I told them later, on one of our last nights together, life is almost all transition. The last 6 months have proven that to us. And you know what you did? You didn't zone out. You weren't just waiting for the next thing. You focused in with me, with this team. My eyes filled with tears, and I smiled. Every day I tried to keep pushing them while I tried to fall deeper in love with this sport that had been so dear to me for so long. Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I repeated it all the time in my instruction. The harder you push back into the ice, the harder it will push you forward. It was science. It was true. But every time I said it during that last season, I had a feeling deep in my belly that I was missing something. I pushed down further and kept pushing the skaters, desperate to make them as strong as possible before I left. And then I remembered what I had been forgetting. That whisper, that nag low in my belly, that ice doesn't just push back. There's a part of it. That's part of it. But the pressure of the blade actually changes the ice's melting point. We bend, we stretch, we flex, we push, and the ice, it yields. It surrenders. It melts. We were in our last week of practices preparing for nationals, our last competition together, when I needed to stop and spend some time with them to improve their circle spacing. Figures had long gone the way of the dodo bird, and my athletes, having never trained them, often struggled to understand the true shape of a circle. I pulled my thick black marker from the pocket of my coaching parka. I waved my skaters out of the way with a motion of my arm and a nod of my head. They cleared tight to the boards, giving me the space I needed. I removed the lid from my marker and took 3 pushes to work up my speed. Going fast, I bent over and placed the top of the marker onto the surface of the ice. Head down, I sailed around in a huge loop. Within seconds, I joined my tracing to where the marker had first touched down. I stood to give the skaters my next instruction. They were still and quiet. I paused as I looked at them searchingly. One girl spoke up, eyes gleaming. "Watching you do that may be the thing that I miss the most," she said. The skaters all looked longingly at the tracing on the ice, a perfect circle, at least 40 feet wide. It had been the preciseness in the calculation that attracted me to the sport in the first place. Figuring out how to place all these bodies on the ice in a position that was beautiful. It had been the symmetry. We all know the standard definitions of symmetry: mirror image, matching parts facing each other around an axis. But my favorite was this. Symmetry is the similarity or exact correspondence between different things. Within a coach-athlete relationship, many may assume the athlete is the one who learns the most in any given situation. But looking at those wide, bright eyes, the bravado and potential of these adolescent girls, I know that I had been the one who had learned the most. When I had started, I had barely been older than my oldest skater. Then I became closer in age to their parents. And at that very point, there were girls in my organization whose parents were younger than me. Over those years, I had grown up alongside them. Over those years, they had taught me over and over what mattered and what didn't matter. And that is why that definition became my favorite. The exact correspondence between different things to me meant living on the outside in a way that matched what was on the inside. Over my coaching career, sometimes things flowed with ease, and sometimes things were hard. When things were hard, it was easy to think I was messing everything up or look for someone else to blame. A million times that year, I had to offer forgiveness to myself for my last season not being my best. But I had remembered, when things got really hard, to look within myself for answers. And that was my wish for them, as we all readied ourselves to close this chapter together. I hoped that I had taught them to live a life that matched what was in their hearts. I hoped that I had taught them symmetry. I have not read this book for 2 years. So thank you for listening. That was chapter 27. This is my book, Swing. The third birthday of it coming out is May 25th. If you've already read it, thank you so much for reading it. If you are willing to request a digital copy, an electronic copy from your library, I need you to know that authors, especially self-published authors like me, make the most money when a library buys an electronic copy. So if you want to support a writer you love, go on your local library's website and request the title, Swing by Ashley Renard. You can request the paperback and then it'll be in your library, or you can request the ebook, the electronic copy, because it's wild, but that is how writers make the most money, is when libraries purchase the ebook copy. So pass that along. You can get this book at link in bio. I'm going to be back tomorrow. We're going to do 7 days of Swing bedtime stories. This was number 1. I wanted to read to you the chapter on transition because I've been reminded of that a lot this year. Leaving this marriage that I wrote about in this book, I lived this story 9 years ago. And then this book came out 3 years ago, and a lot has changed in my life since then. And I wouldn't change a damn thing except that big pot of soup that I forgot out in my garage this year. I had to dump the whole thing. It's the only thing I regret, truly. Think. I've learned through this to trust myself and to trust my decisions. And this past year was a year of huge transition. Leaving my marriage, starting over in this new space, redefining my relationships with my kids. And if you've been following along, you know that I'm very happy about these choices and these decisions and where we are as a family of 5 now, and even my relationship with Manny and how we're continuing to grow as co-parents and friends. But this time of transition has been a struggle with me trying to remember what parts of myself will always be there and what parts of me are going to be dropped or were dropped as I left my marriage. And if you need support in that, I am hosting retreats here at my house you can check out, I'll drop the link below. It's Witch Mansion Retreats, because this house, my friend Kate named this house. It's a beautiful house. It's such a gorgeous, special, incredible house with an indoor pool. It's just bonkers, this beautiful place I landed in. So I'm having retreats here, and they are pay what you can retreats, and also with a virtual option if you are not able to travel here. I live just outside Philadelphia, about 60 minutes from the Philadelphia airport. I would love for you to come here, visit with me and my sweet, beautiful, magical cat hunter, and the other women who are coming as well. So I'm going to drop that below, or you can check it up in my bio. Bye, everyone. Night.